from Gallagher Animal Management. Rob is the Gallagher Territory Manager for Northern New South Wales and Southern Queensland. Rob has helped many producers, including myself, to design, build and upgrade electric fences that work to keep livestock in and ferals and pests out. In my case, to keep kangaroos out of one of my oats paddocks that was thoroughly decimated by the little beggars last year. Rob knows what works with electric fencing and what doesn't, and I'm sure that he will be able to pass this knowledge on. Rob will speak for 45 minutes and will then be followed by Alan Forrest. Alan is using electric fences on properties at Ilfracombe and in the Traprock for sheep, goats, and I noticed by his introduction, pigs. Alan uses a mixture of products from different manufacturers and has a wealth of practical tips to make electric fencing work. Alan will speak for 10 minutes and then we will have 15 minutes for your questions of either speaker. And my special thanks to those people who sent in their questions before the webinar. So, without further ado, I'm pleased to invite Rob Doro to take control of the webinar and discuss electric fencing, the ins and outs. Rob.
Thank you very much, Noel, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to present this webinar this afternoon. Also on behalf of Gallagher, but on behalf of the industry as a whole, with just the fundamentals in relation to electric fencing. So, whilst we've seen increased pressure from feral animals impacting on producers' returns over recent times, and with the cost of those returns to producers being ever put under pressure, it is now that electric fencing is even probably more paramount than ever as an effective control measure. In addition to this, we also there's obvious other benefits that flow on as well, as we've seen with the improved fencing and pasture management, that we've seen reduced effects on pasture degradation, reduced weed infestations, and we've also seen the reduced risk of disease spread, proving a boost for biosecurity. Electric fencing systems are the frontline barrier in the control and the reduction of feral animals. They form part of an effective solution, and we encourage producers to continue to be involved with many of the other control methods that are currently being practiced. We must approach the issue with an overall property management plan and realise that initial planning and proper advice will determine the overall success and effectiveness of animal control. In this webinar, we will discuss briefly how to best design, develop and implement a system so as to maximise effectiveness, minimise maintenance and increase profitability and sustainability, whilst being mindful of the increased input costs and lower returns to producers. Electric fence systems are continually demonstrating opportunities for producers, whether constructing new fences, improving the effectiveness and longevity of old fences, or creating a safe and secure barrier from increased pressure. I think it's important that we realise that it's not all about building a brand new shiny fence. There's plenty of alternatives available to producers that we can use their existing fences to to minimise costs and to gain effectiveness. We've got many cases within the industry where we can document quite effectively the improvements that we've made by the induction or the inclusion of electric fencing with current projects sort of thing. I just draw your attention to the middle of the slide in relation to the wild dog control there. Now these are actually the job that's being carried out at Barcaldine, and you can see there by the significant difference in lambing and weaning that have been made over the number of years since the electric fence system's been implemented there. I hope we go the right way. Okay. With electrics, it's about creating a psychological barrier. Electrics can be respected or are respected by all animals. There's the ability to the short, sharp shocks from the energizer that that creates that that psychological barrier. You obviously can build a lot more kilometres of fence using electrics than you can on conventional methods. So basics of the electric system and how they work, there's two systems. There's an all-live system, or there's what we commonly refer to as an earth return system. Given the larger property sizes that are now being affected at such high rate with feral animals, we continually talk earth return due to the fact that a lot of the country that these systems are in have poor conductivity. They don't earth well. The seasonal conditions have been extremely dry over recent times, and as a result of the dry conditions, then we have trouble with adequate earthing. Components of electric fence system, very basically, there's three components. There's the energizer, the earth system, and an insulated fence system, which allows us to obviously get the current out in the paddock. Just on the most probably important part of all of electric fencing is earthing, and without adequate earthing, we will continue to have issues with our fence performance. As you can see in the diagram there, the diagram there illustrates the earth return, with the central wire being the earth wire, which is carried all the way back to the energizer, regardless of the distance that fence may run out across the property. Just a simple few checklists there on how to choose the right system and things to consider when you're actually you're looking to design a system. Obviously, we look to see whether we've got mains power available, whether that system can be run via 240, or whether we need to be using remote solar systems. We also need to take into consideration what distance that fence is, like how big the operation is going to be, and in that we'd also consider that we may have a combination of both a 240-volt system and a 12-volt remote system that to run the further boundaries of the property. But, also, and obviously, with today's consideration, we're talking about keeping feral animals out and our our pride livestock in. So and a lot of that determines, like with that, is to the placement of wires, where we need to place wires on the fence, at what height we need to place the electric wires internally to control the animals on the inside, which may be at a different height for the animals we're trying to control from the outside. The other consideration there is vegetation. A lot of systems will fail under pressure if we don't allow the size of the energizer taking into consideration just what pressure might be on that fence with vegetation. We've seen it just recently with the rapid growth of the buffalo and that in western regions after the rain, that a lot of those fence systems out there struggle to get on top of that buffalo because of this that really rapid growth sort of thing. So the key in that is that when we design our system, we actually look at an energizer that's got the dual capability to be able to handle some of that vegetation. So. And obviously, is the fence going to be permanent or portable? Well, in this case, we'll be talking permanent, and that is where we really need to make sure that when we put our product selection of the insulators and the wire, the post and everything that we're going to use in the fence, that we make sure that we get the right product from the beginning. So, anywhere where we're looking where we've got significant pressure, whether it be from dogs or from kangaroos or other feral pests, that we would use porcelain insulators. We would use products that will withstand that pressure from those animals. We certainly wouldn't want to be looking at using any of our black plastic poly insulators because they're not designed to withstand the pressure that they're undergoing in that area. As I spoke about earlier, earthing is probably the single most largest issue that will be the cause of an electric fence system to either work properly or to fail. You know, 8 out of every 10 fencing problems that we face today, most of those are associated with poor or inadequate earthing. General rule of thumb on the larger size energizers is 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's 4 earth stakes, 3 metres apart, 2 metres deep in the ground, and all joined together as one continual wire. And that will also then be joined back to our fence system with an earth return wire as well. So it's, that earthing network is actually customised to the energizer that would be used in the job. One of the big issues that's faced with electric fencing is the maintenance of issues. Like a lot of producers will say to us, well, I want to go ahead with electrics, but I'm concerned that there's more maintenance issues and that sort of thing. When we design a system correctly and we've got proper wire placement and proper product utilisation, we can minimise the maintenance to a great degree. Obviously, there's always maintenance with any fence, whether it be a conventional fence or whether it be an electric fence. But that slide there just illustrates that there is product available on the market that give us the ability to remotely monitor your fence from points out in the paddock or on the property. And you know, it's just a reassurance that there is product available there that can help minimise that maintenance and make more of your time. Just go through basically now there's some fence designs here that are typical of some of the installations that we see around the place. It's important that whilst the demonstrations or the illustrations there, the wire placements and configurations can be changed. Some are based on our southern counterparts down in you know, lower New South Wales, Victoria, what have you, whereas some of the other illustrations are more typical for us here in Queensland. So, the first slide there is actually an offset, hot tip lock set there that would actually allows you to power up either side of the fence. Very effective in the addition to existing fences where a lot of people may have, you know, fabricated fence, that they can add those products in relatively cost effectively and get some extra life out of the fence and also and create a much more effective barrier against the pressures that we're currently under. The price is quoted there, an indicative price only, subject to your input costs and to where you may be purchasing products. And I can go through that later on if anybody wanted more detail on that. Excuse me. And it can also be depending on post spacings and all that sort of stuff, and your terrain, whether you're you know, whether you're at Mitchell or St George and you've got relatively flat country, or whether you're at Inverell or something where the country is a lot more hilly, and that will obviously the placement of those products determines the actual cost of the job. That the second slide there is a typical, what we would class a 7 or 8 wire multi-wire ferrule fence, and as you can see there, as I was saying earlier, like we're recommending that we use porcelain products to create longevity in the fence, but also to minimise that maintenance that we would see otherwise. Again, there the configuration or the placement of the wires in the diagram, typically in my area, in southeast Queensland, northern New South Wales, we would tend to have an earth wire on the top of the fence, basically as cheap insurance for lightning protection, and we would also have an earth wire very close to the ground at the bottom of the fence. So, and again, that system would be run all earth return. So, basically, with the earth return system, wherever we take a live wire on the fence to take the power out, we take an earth wire as well, so that we continually connect that earthing network all the way back to the earth station at the homestead or at the energizer. Another design there, and quite typically used in many applications, is a sloping fence design. As you can see, there's little short pickets that are holding the hot wires away from the existing fence. Very effective on old netting fences and that, where we've got a lot of loose wire and that sort of thing, that we can get the live wire away from that fence, so that to minimise those maintenance and any possibility of shorting. Very, very cost effective as well, and there is a myriad of products available on the market, whether it be poly droppers or whatever, that will accommodate that type of fencing. Okay, just moving on there. This is just a couple of pictures here I've included in the presentation, just to give it an illustration of a fairly significant fabricated fence that's been quite commonly used in Western regions. I just wanted to highlight here, while this is that fabricated product or that fabricated type fencing is very effective in minimising the animals entering the property. I just wanted to highlight there that with the inclusion of those products that we spoke about earlier, like the hot tip lock set, in this type of fencing, it would actually protect this fence, and it would also give not only a physical barrier, it will also give a psychological barrier. And as you can see there, this fence has only been up probably 4 or 5 months, and we can already see that the animals have been channeling their way under the fence. So, likewise, the same position or the same spot in the fence that this photo was taken, the animals have actually been going over the fence as well. So, with the inclusion of electrics there, we can create that psychological barrier, but also at the same time we can protect the investment of that fence, which I would imagine would be at $5,000 or $6,000 a kilometre plus erection cost. So I think given the addition of the electrics there, we've got the ability to really make a difference, become much more effective, and also be a smart return for the producer as well. Guys, I think I'm flying fairly well ahead of time, so hopefully we've covered some basic stuff there for you, and it's been a benefit. But I think just on a few key points there, it's very important that when you go to do an electric fence installation, that you actually talk to people that have been in the industry for some time, that have got the knowledge, that have got jobs on the ground that they have got proven results out of. And I think it's important you do that. There's certainly a lot of different products on the market, and then increasingly we see a lot of stuff being advertised on the internet, and people investing in those products, unfortunately they get them to find out that they're inadequate, or they're of an inferior quality. So there's plenty of good guys out in the industry that you can talk to, and I just really push that point hard, is that you talk to people that know what they're doing. And it's a bit like building a house. If you get the foundations right, then we can continue to build on it from there on, sort of thing. So I've been involved in jobs in the past where guys have done fence installations, and they've basically got all the work done, and they've asked us to come out and have a look at their job, and we've got out there, and they haven't had earth wires under their gateways. They've had a machine in and dug all their trenches and everything, can run live wires through, but not carried their earth wires through. So very, very important that that we get that information right at the beginning. As I said earlier, earthing is one of the most critical things that will determine whether or not your electric fence system is going to work. A lot of people will say to me that I've got 500 star pickets in the fence, and they're all in the ground 300, 400 mil in the ground, that I've got adequate enough earthing there. Well, the truth is that 300 or 400 mil in the ground, if it was on a black soil river flat, would be magic. But the fact that in a lot of the country where we're seeing these increased pressures, that top 300 mil soon dries out, and then we don't have any earthing at all. So for a system to work effectively, the circuit's got to be completed. So the animal touches the fence out in the paddock, then it's got to either travel through the ground back to the energizer to get a shock, or it's, in the case of an earth return, it would touch the live and the earth wire, and it would fast track that return to the energizer, so that the animal gets a much more direct shock. You know, I was on a job north of India, some time ago, a guy had effectively had 7,500 kilovolts in his fence at the outer part of his property. Yet the cattle weren't respecting the fence at all. They were just walking through it, and it was an all-live system. So the problem was that the energizer was that far away from where the animal was touching it that it physically ground couldn't carry the current back to complete the circuit. So the animal wasn't even getting a shock at all. Okay, invest in quality products. I think it's there is a lot of good quality product in the market. There's a lot of new things coming to market all the time. I think it's very important that you know that when you make those investments, that you get products that are proven in the market. They have the ability to deliver what your expectation is, and that you know that they're coming from reputable suppliers. Electric fences are a proven cost-effective way to build more kilometres of fence. We know that that we can build a lot more kilometres cheaper than what we can versus conventional fencing, and a lot of that's to do with you know, we don't have to have our posts as close together as we do in conventional fencing. We don't have the same investment in wire as conventional fencing, and we know that when it's powered up properly and there's the right energies in the fence, that it can be much more effective than just standard conventional fencing. A well-designed fence delivers a sharp, short and memorable shock and creates a psychological barrier. I think that's it's important that, as we were talking earlier about those photos, is that, you know, coupled together with that type of fence, that we can even be more effective when we partner those two types of designs together. I'd just like to encourage everybody to attend any of the initiatives that the industry put on, such as the Predator Day at Mitchell on the 20th of June. I'll certainly be there with some of my colleagues, and we'll have demonstration fences up so people can come along and have a look at them and see what we're talking about and how we can demonstrate just what we believe to be the right design and the right way to go about it. And I'm also more than happy to talk to anybody individually later on if they would like, and you know, and there's other services that we offer as well. We can do, you know, farm fence health checks, and you know, and we quite often attend, you know, like do on-farm calls and that sort of thing as well. So, well, hopefully, guys, that's been of benefit to you. I'm more than happy to take questions and go from there. And I'll hand back over to you, Noel.
Thanks, Rob. We might take a few questions in a minute. You can, as we indicated earlier, do that two ways. Either type your question into the question box and hit send, or hit the raised hand that's adjacent to your name. Before we do, I'd like to remind people that this webinar is being recorded, and the record will be available on the Leading Sheep website. And particularly for those people who joined the webinar late, that facility is a very useful facility. One of the things that I've noticed personally is that once you have a good electric fence in place, it's remarkable how it increases in how you add extra wires and extra fences to the existing electric fence. So if I had one piece of advice, it'd be don't underestimate the energizer that you do need, and I can recommend the simple health check that Rob talked about for my fence, which I inherited. It was a simple pronunciation of death. It was based on the principle of never the same spacing twice, but we got it up to now something that is keeping the kangaroos out of the oats. Okay, there are probably some questions, and I'll hand over to Alex to deal with those. Alex.
All right, thanks, Noel. We'll cover a couple of quick questions here. If you do have more questions, please type them into the question box and send them through. So, Rob, the first question is, how far should you offset your wires when using offset insulators?
Yeah, right. Okay. No, there's depending on the fence design. Typically, on a say we've got a standard say 7-wire fence with a 4 or 5 planes and a couple of barbs or whatever. Well, probably going about a one off the fence. Just did looking at a job at St George at the moment where we're looking at doing a 160 mil block set on either side of the fence, which will give us protection from the barrier side where the kangaroos and the dogs are coming from, but also giving us adequate protection on the inside of the fence for goats and what have you as well. So it's really depending, Alec, on the if we were looking at a fabricated fence that had fairly wide post spacings, then we would extend that offset wire further off the fence just to minimise the risk of getting that live wire and that fabricated fence entangled. So there's a myriad of different products. We've been effective as well as putting star pickets, little short stakes away from the existing fence and placing them sort of probably 12 inches off the existing fence with porcelain clip bolts. So depending on the fence design and on how far away the posts are in the fence, like some of the old fences are sort of 3 or 4 yards apart. Well, then we can probably use the closer settings there, sort of thing.
Righto, thank you. Earlier you mentioned about the roos going over an existing fence. How can you stop roos going over the fence? Is that to do with hot wires on the top, or what was your thoughts there? If you could expand on that, please, Rob.
Yep, no worries. Yeah, no, probably in consideration with that fabricated fence, we'd be putting a hot wire closer to the ground and using that fabricated as the earth return, and creating that psychological barrier. Once we've had roos come in contact with electrics, we know that they'll avoid it at all costs. So we'd be initially stopping them from going under the fence, creating that psychological barrier, and if they were continuing to go over, then in a lot of cases we're better to let those animals go over, because normally the only reason why they're going over a high fence like this, they're under pressure. Let them go, and then if we put hot wires high up on the fence and that sort of thing, then we're going to create an entanglement area. We'll also create an area where where we're going to run into a maintenance problem as well. So hopefully that answers that.
Yep, thank you. Another one here. A question: earth wire or live wire for your bottom wire on an electric fence?
Yeah, okay. I would recommend an earth wire as the bottom wire. Basically, probably about an inch above ground level, and then we would put a live wire above that, and we would be going earth live, alternating those wires and getting that earth return, so that if something goes through, they're touching an earth wire and a live wire at the same time. And we also keep it up that little bit, because if we've got a live wire right down on the ground that low, then we're going to have induction back into the ground, so we're going to lose the capability for the fence to power more kilometres, and we also just run that risk of vegetation shorting out the fence.
Right, we'll just go a couple quick more. Now another one here. What was the 1 in the 4-3-2-1 earthing rule of thumb? What was the number 1 rule?
Okay, 4-3-2-1 is one continual wire. So you would connect everything. All those earth stakes would be connected with one continual wire back to the energizer. So we're for earth. And for earth stokes, they were talking, like our bigger energizers, like our sort of probably anything from about 12 joules up is where we need the 4 earth stokes. When we get into our bigger units, our 75 joule units, you're looking at probably a minimum of 6 super earth kits. So they, we really need to require a big, to get a big earth network happening, just so that we can get really effective control of what we're trying to achieve.
Right, and let's go to the last question. There's a fair few questions coming in, but I'll just go this one more and then we'll leave the rest until the end of the webinar. In one of your slides, the photo of the hot tip offsets showed the hot tip as up in one photo and down in the next. Is there a difference?
There is. We would recommend that they go down normally, but given that you can also, the way that they're designed, they actually hug into the back of the star picket. So if you want to bring a live wire out on the side that doesn't, if they're singles, that doesn't sort of appeal to, then you can turn them upside down, and you can still use the same mounting bracket and put that wire out on the opposite side. Yeah. So the product's actually designed. It's got a bend in the double lock set that it bends around the post. So yeah, you can actually see in that diagram that the bottom one would be our typical installation, the double one, whereas the single, because it's come out on the single side of the star picket, that's why it has to be upside down to be able to carry the wire.
Righto, thanks for that, Rob. There's a few more there, but I'll leave them until the end of the webinar. I encourage people to continue typing their questions in, and we'll cover them at the end. Rob's going to hang around, so he'll be able to answer those questions after Alan's presentation, but I'll hand it back to you, Noel.
Okay, Alex, you can hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. It's Noel Dempsey again. I would now like to welcome our second speaker, Alan Forrest. Alan and I, when we were first discussing his part in this webinar, kept on telling me about an experience or a useful tip or some success that he had, and followed it up. Do you think that would be useful? My answer was invariably yes, so I'm sure Alan's presentation will be both useful and informative. Over to you, Alan.
Good afternoon, everyone. No, yeah, I'm struggling to remember what piece of advice I gave you, but I'm sure all of it was good. All of it basically comes from a practical background of having used electric fencing. So, yeah, I was born and bred around Longreach and still have a property out there, and we've added this piece of Traprock onto it for marketing purposes, still running the same type of stock, basically goats, sheep, cattle, and yeah, goats were the real catalyst for me to get into electric fencing. I saw an opportunity and went with that to get into goat production and a depot, and yeah, just sort of gradually went from there. I had the goats and had to get the fencing up. So yeah, that was basically the only cost-effective way that I could see that I could change from a traditional, wool growing to more a mixed enterprise where I was running goats, and from there we've sort of progressed to, looking at total fence integrity. So being able to control everything when you want to spell pastures, create worm-free paddocks, which is more pertinent to this Traprock country, and also just the longevity of the fencing you already have, because I still have very vivid memories of my father replacing an old plain wire fence with a lovely hinge joint fence, wooden posts, droppers, the whole works. And when I first left school, I used to spend about half a day a fortnight patching up wires in that fence where the roos just annihilated it because they'd been so used to going backwards and forwards through that old fence. So, you know, from then I was thinking there had to be a better way. But I did have a couple of initial forays into electric fencing where I made some very common mistakes. You know, I'll just give it a try. I'll buy a small energizer. I'll use a bit of poly pipe for an insulator instead of buying a porcelain one, which led me to go away from electric fencing for a while. But yeah, when I then got started looking at goats and started asking a few people who had used electric fences, you know, what to do, what they had done. Yeah, off we went and haven't looked back, which was basically, you know, 8 years ago. At Gordonvale at Ilfracombe, our first project for the goats, I went basically around the outside of 3 paddocks, which put 9,000 acres behind hot wires, and none of that fencing was new. It was all just outriggers on existing conventional fencing. And from there, Mick Rigby, who runs the place for us, him and his wife Karen have done a hell of a job there in dividing those paddocks up with electrics, and then fencing. The complete northern boundary has now been electrified, and doing some work on the southern end. So with the way the dogs are moving around the district, that sort of really gives you a little bit of comfort in that at least you've got some protection, and if you do get one in, you hopefully you've got something to, you know, work against to either chase them down or trap them. So yeah, that slide there is a fence at Gordonvale. So we'll move on to the next one. When it comes up, that fence was built replacing an old marsupial netting fence, and a section of that was also some old plain wire. And the property next door, and we do too to a limited extent, has coral cactus. So during a meeting with the council, so forth, about control and eradication of this coral cactus, we came to an agreement with the neighbours that we'd replace the fence in an effort to stop it spreading into us. They supplied the materials, and Mick and Karen have put it up. But in that, my choice for a fence was just to continue what we're doing and use a plain wire fence with a couple of hot wires. The neighbour had concerns about the volume of electricity we'd put through it, so they came to an agreement on that. The 2 hot wires are actually, I think, 3.8 mil high tensile, which not too sure what they cost him, but they are certainly brilliant at carrying a good charge. So that sort of does relate to when you're planning your fence to look at the amount of power that you want or require, and use the appropriate materials. I'll move on to the next one when it comes up for you, which is fence design. Rob sort of mentioned earth a fair bit, and the most important piece of information I think I was given when I started running goats was to carry the earth. So that's about the first 3 rules of electric fencing, especially in any dry country or areas where you're doing long distances. Just make sure you carry that earth in your fence back to the energizer. And if you see that at some stage it might be a bit difficult to do that, and you think, well, maybe it's maybe I don't need to do it, that's when you sort of need to give yourself an uppercut and work out a way to get it back, because you just get so much more if you can make that circuit, give the animal as many possible chances as it can as completing a circuit and getting a shock. Down to energisers, as Rob said, even though he's Gallagher, there's a lot of good and different products out there. I use a mix of different products. When I started the goat project, I went into Elders in Longridge, and I bought the biggest unit they could supply me, the biggest battery solar powered unit, which I've never regretted. So, in my view, work out what you want and then double it, or just go and get the biggest one that they make at the time, because as Noel said, once you've got it, once it's working, you'll see so many opportunities just to, I can add this to it and I can go here, and so it just saves you, it gives you the maximum initial power to train stock when they're not familiar with electricity, and then the versatility to just keep extending that without having to then go and upgrade your energizer. So yeah, on that slide, the highlight there is potential faults, which Rob also mentioned. The time checking faults. The fence in that photo, a similar design to that, with products that are designed for electric fencing, all new, no old wire, no barbs, no, that fence there requires very, very, very little maintenance. I use a slightly different configuration here where I use 8 wires rather than 7, and apart from an animal being spooked, chased into the fence, or in the initial phase where they don't realise it's electric, getting tangled up, but usually after the first couple of weeks you'll very, very rarely have to do anything to a brand new electrified fence like that. On that, using products that are designed for it, cost cutting due to say, well, I won't bother using joint clamps, I'll just tie the wires together. Every place that you've got gaps with where electricity's joining, you're going to get voltage leak. You get enough of them, it just sort of crucifies the power that you were trying to put down the fence. So, in my view, electric fencing is very cost effective compared to a conventional fence that you feel would control animals to that level. So you're better off spending that money rather than trying to cheapen it up a little bit more by cutting corners. So when you're designing a fence, talking to someone the likes of Rob, who knows what products are available, what products should be used, I think is as important as speaking to someone who's used electric fencing themselves, because products can continually be changed and improved. So it's always worthwhile to touch base with your produce agent or electric fence rep and just see what's available as of today. And having talked to Rob as we were setting this up and talking about some of the new things that Gallagher's actually working on, with remote sensors on the fence, I feel it's just going to increase the value of electric fences when you don't have to physically get out of a vehicle and make sure you got power if something's going to go wrong with that fence. Potentially it can ring your mobile phone and tell you there's a problem. I think that sort of remote monitoring is going to be a great leap forward in electric fencing. So probably I'm not all that used to doing this sort of stuff, but the first slide showed the pigs in my yard here that run free range, basically behind an 8-wire hinge joint fence with a hot wire above it, and or 1 or 2 hot wires on the inside. I put the hinge joint on the back of the post, ran 2 hot wires off the single side. Then I found out that pigs could still push under from the other side, so I added an outrigger to that side, and that boar pig weighs in at about 300 kilos, and he just will not touch that fence, even when the sows in the adjoining pen are in season. They make some very awful noises, but he just will not touch that fence. And without a, metal post cemented in the ground, sty-type fence, I don't know, how any other fence that doesn't include electricity, could control an animal that size. So whenever I go to feed my pigs and I see him there not touching that fence, it sort of just reiterates to me the power of electricity. Especially once animals are used to it. So yeah, I just, I suppose this is an official question, but would you climb through that fence when you see it's insulated? Would you climb through it a second time if it booted you the first time? So that's that psychological effect it has on you. You ask someone to grab a hot wire, and very few people will take you on with it. So continuing on with fence design, as I said, we've used outriggers, new fences. Just looking at your situation where you want to improve your livestock control, and then coming up with a plan that hopefully works without having to be redone, redesigned because you've made a mistake. But in this next slide, there's a picture here at the corner of our property, Logan Krail, which is a sort of a 3-way boundary corner. So on the right, the existing netting fence was what was there. When I bought the property, that fence used to continue on the left, adjoining the neighbours, my neighbour or 2 of my neighbours, so they redid their boundary fence. That new fence consists of 7-line hinge joint with a barb above it, a barb below it, 2 high tensile wires, one at the top of the hinge joint, one at the bottom, and then he went through and added just little wire droppers sort of thing between the top barb and the hinge joint, and the bottom barb and the hinge joint to try and stop the barb from getting plaited up. This next slide, as it comes up, shows what I chose to do on my fence, which basically that netting fence was reasonably unviable after so many years with the netting being buried in the ground. A lot of it was rusted off. A lot of the support wires rusted and broken. Quite a few roo holes through it. You'd fix, and I by that stage had to bring goats down here due to seasonal conditions out west. So you'd go and fix one hole, and only to find out that from them rubbing on it, pushing through it, 2 days later there was another hole beside it. So I added 2 hot wires. Mainly I used 2 because there was some disused 2-wire electric fencing around here, and the setup on Rio rods with insulators. I had that gear I could reclaim, so I thought, well, I've got 2 insulators per Rio rod, I might as well use them. I fully believe one offset wire would have been equally as effective, but also another consideration there is that's reasonably close. I'd probably go another 8K into some multi-wire fencing, and then single, being powered by those 2 wires. So it gave me 2 pipes to carry the water. If you want to use the analogy of moving water is similar to moving electricity. So yeah, went with that. And then the I'll move on to the next slide when it comes up.
Alan, it's Noel here. You've got 3 minutes left.
Righto. Thanks, Noel. There's a slide showing where there's a roo pad going through that new fence, and we do not have any roo breaches through that netting fence with the hot wire above it. So one thing I look at, you know, what I spent on those 2 wires compared to what was spent on that, you know, a very, very strong conventional fence, basically over a few kilometres. What I saved paid for, you know, the biggest energiser that was on the market at the day, and allowed me to continue around and do this whole block. So, yeah, as you can see, for my mind, I can see the value in a good energiser in what it saves you, you know, when you're having to look at how to fix up an old fence. Next slide here is our goat yard out at Gordonvale, and Mick did this, and so to strengthen it up, one side of the fence can have 200, 300, 400 billies. The other side, the nannies out of that mob. Did similar to what I did here, where he put the hinge joint on the back of the post, insulator and hot wires on the front, but then he added a maxi post to the back of that as well, hot wires on that side. So that basically strengthened the posts, and gave hot wires both sides, and that works very effectively. And I'd use that same sort of system for backyards of sheep yards, sort of thing, because it's just a hell of a lot cheaper than trying to build a solid fence. Gateways, I have had some dramas with underground cable under gateways. Gallagher has replaced some of that product, but I think, part of it too, I'd be installing it a little bit differently, possibly using some electrical conduit to protect that cable a bit more from the weather. But, that's basically, and I'll reiterate what Rob said, you've got the trench dug, make sure you carry an earth wire under the gate when you're carrying your power wire, because it's a big job, and a job you probably never get to if you've got to go back and redo it. And then we'll move on. A lot of people seem to be, as that photo of Rob had there, of the exclusion fencing, which seems to be very popular at the moment. Would create a great physical barrier if I had the money and the probably the topography. That fence with hot wires on it, I think, would be an ultimate to achieve. But we've got a photo on the southern end of our place where there was a hinge joint fence across a floodplain. We've had two events like this in the last 2 years where that fence has just been absolutely flattened by water and debris. And so I wonder, what the outcomes of trying to put an exclusion fence across there. We had added one hot wire to that fence, and that fence is in the process now of being replaced with the same 7-wire fence that you saw with the coral cactus. So on to the next slide. When it comes up, we used lightning poly droppers in that fence for the coral cactus. They do seem to have a few issues that we are going to address, in that probably 20 or 30 of them have broken. Another point on that fence, when you first start out, you'll do something. If it doesn't quite work properly, you may need to, revisit it, see what you need to do, talk to people. We're having a few places, probably old roo pads from the old fence where roos are digging under that bottom wire, compared to the fence that Mick electrified up on the northern end where the wire was already, the bottom earth wire was probably a bit closer to the ground. We're going to look at sort of doing a job of blocking off those roo pads with a little bit of foot netting to see what effect that has, whether the roos will just move to the next panel or whether they'll keep trying on that panel. That's the idea of blocking off the whole bottom of the panel, and if that's not as effective as we need it, well, it could be a matter of going and knocking those posts down another inch or two to get that wire onto closer to the ground. So yeah, that possibly concludes what I had sort of planned to say. But to go back to the start, is the size of your energizer to give you maximum effectiveness, and also the earth return is critically important. So yeah, I think that's sort of about what I had planned. So I'll throw it back to Noel or Alex and see if anyone's got any questions.
Okay, it's Noel O'Dempsey here. I'd invite anybody to ask their question of either. I'd like to thank our two speakers, and as I said before, you can either ask a question by raising your hand, you will be unmuted, or you can type the question into the question box and hit send. Okay, over to you, Alex. You can handle the questions.
All right, thanks, Noel. Rob, do you know anything around what is the legal position with fences, with electric fences along roads? Is there anything you know of?
Yeah, we can't construct a electric fence external to our own boundary fence. So, like, we can put products on our existing boundary fence, but we can't, like, say, put a sloping fence on a distance outside on external to our own area, sort of thing.
All right. Do you have many clients, or do you know of many people that have had success with using electric fences to keep out foxes?
Yeah, no, probably my counterpart in the south. Sorry, he's had a lot of experience down through Glenelg and areas there, actually, where they've noticed that a lot of the foxes are starting to now move in packs as well. They're actually forming packs and actually mustering ewes and lambs and that into mobs, and then actually killing that way. He has certainly had very good results with that through there. Very similar sort of approach that we would take with them as we do with wild dogs.
Okay, there's a couple of comments from people. Firstly, it's from a Biosecurity Queensland member, and they said secure fencing, especially boundaries, is essential for animal disease prevention and control, as well as pests and ferals. In particular, separation of flocks is critical to control of endemic diseases such as lice, foot rot, and particularly OJD. So that was just a comment from one of the participants. Another comment is investing in a good fault finder can save a lot of time. So, Rob, I'll direct another one to you. Is a 7-plane wire electric fence with an earth wire top and bottom the best solution for keeping out meat sheep? For keeping in meat sheep, and keeping feral animals out. Also, how many live wires and what spacing is most effective? I imagine that's post spacings.
Right. Okay. Yep. No, they're all very effective. There's lots of different. Like we can use star pickets. There's other systems in the market that have got dropper type systems, that sort of thing. So very effective. Generally speaking, 3 to 4 live wires with that. It wouldn't be just a single earth wire. We would use all the non-powered wires as part of that earth return network, and we'd also add into those type of fencing intermediate earths around the property. It's in strategic places as well. So, like, if we've got a seep or a melon hole or somewhere that's traditionally, more moist than other places, we would use that as part of the earth work as well. Generally speaking, the post spacing, depending on the terrain, again, sort of thing, probably 7-8 metres. Some guys will stretch their posts out with electrics out to 10 or 12, depending on on that terrain. And I think the good thing about electrics is that it is adaptable to some of the historical stuff that people have done in the past as well. A lot of fencing we've seen, on some of the properties, their father or their grandfathers put up. So, we can work with all that traditional stuff as well, and different products there. So, I suppose at the end of the day, the simplest thing with all that is to get in touch with, someone like myself that's either got experience with it, or we've got colleagues, or we've got clients that are actually out there with the systems already in place that we can talk about and design up the proper system.
Cheers. Alan, there's a question for you while we're on a similar topic. Just wondering how far apart your steel posts are on your Ilfracombe property.
A lot of the stuff we're doing now is 10 metres, and that allows your 5-metre panels with a dropper in the middle. I did do some conventional fences with outriggers where I stretched it to 20 metres for outriggers. Very hard to go back and add the extra ones if you're using porcelain, if you find they're sort of not quite close enough together, so we tend to err on the side of the caution and stick to that 10 metres. You're paying a little bit more for infrastructure, but you just get your space, your drops and your wires, your heights that little bit better. Maybe if you weren't running goats, it wouldn't be as critical, but yeah, that's what we have tend to move back to.
Righto, thank you for that. Rob, possibly, what is a fire risk if fencing is arcing? Is there a fire risk? Have we had any clients with that problem?
Yeah, no, there is a bit of misconception about that, and quite often you'll hear people talk about, like vegetation management, the vegetation, electric fence will actually burn the vegetation off a fence. Well, it doesn't actually burn it off. What it does is the continual pulse actually destroys the plant tissue, and eventually the plant tissue dies back. So there'll be a lot of other things start a grass fire before an electric fence will.
I'm just trying to sort through, there's a few similar questions here. Are figure of 8 joins suitable for joining wires?
Yeah, no, they are, definitely. We just encourage people that use a figure 8. It's probably one of the most effective knots as far as carrying the current goes through. And might just add there that a lot of people make the assumption that the energy in an electric fence actually travels through the wire. It's not the case. The energy actually travels around the outside of the wire, and that's hence the reason when we use a 4mm wire over a 2.5mm wire, then we've got the ability to carry more power further. A 2.5, the standard tie-easy or flexible type product is 35 ohms of resistance per K, whereas the 4mm is about 11.5 ohms of resistance. So technically we can carry about 3 times the amount of power through a 4mm wire as we can a 2.5. So yeah, definitely figure 8 is very effective in carrying current. But also, just might add on that is that when you do tie your figure 8s off, is that you actually twist the tails of the figure 8s back onto the wire so that you don't have a point where you can, a catch point where that wire can get entangled with an earth wire or anything like that.
Okay. There's a question, for dry areas, are bipolar energizers an advantage where poor grounding is continuing to be an issue in dry times?
Yeah, we don't actually manufacture a bipolar type system, so I'm not overly conversed with it. we would encourage that that we want a full powered fence all the time, and we would be developing an earth network by using those intermediate earthing, strategic, placed at strategic points around the property, but also by using like super earth kits and that sort of thing at the actual base unit of the energizer.
Okay, I'd just like to encourage people to fill in the evaluation also on today's webinar. You'll find it in your chat box. You should have seen a message come up, and there's a link there to take you to the evaluation. So after we finish today's webinar, if you just click on that link, or if you're leaving early, please take the time to click on that link and fill in the evaluation today. Question for Alan. What training do you do for your ferals? Goats, that is, sorry.
Yeah, well, when I get feral goats in, either here or at Gordonvale, they'll go into a yard that's a hinge joint fence with electricity on the inside, so that you've got the physical barrier, and then as they try to breach that, they get the shock. I've found if you're just going to release feral goats into onto a plain wire electric fence, a lot of the time they're that used to going through the fences that they're halfway through before they get hit. And then once one has gone through, especially if it's the natural leader of the mob, you've got a lot of psychological want for the rest to go through. Sometimes only 3 or 4 may go through if your power's good enough, but it's basically get them trained to that psychological barrier while knowing they can't get out at all because the physical barrier's there. And then once you've done that for 2 or 3 days, they'll then totally respect just a plain wire fence with electricity.
Thanks, Alan. Rob, in Western Queensland, people have a lot of problem with the migrating waves of roos that come through. And these roos would not know the fence is electric. So have you got any clients in the western part of Queensland that are having an effect with electric fences on these migrating number of roos, rather than the roos just that know the fence are there?
Yeah, it certainly has. Alec, some of the statistics in that earlier pictures there are on a property that estimated they had between 60 to 90,000 roos, and they've had great success with managing and controlling them as well. We find that once the roos they realise that the fence has got energy and it's powered up, that they'll actually track off those fences. In some cases 2 or 3 metres off the actual fence. So it will educate them, but it also it does form a very, very much a barrier as well.
Alex, Noel here. It's about time that we were due to finish the webinar. So I'd like to thank all the people that have asked questions. If there were any questions unanswered, I'd like you to avail yourself of the invitation that Rob has made to contact him directly, and he'll answer those questions if he can. I encourage everyone who wants to visit the Leading Sheep website, and I extend the same invitation that Rob did. Come along to the Mitchell Predator Control Day on the 20th of June. That's a Friday. If you've got any questions, Rob and his fellow workers, and we'll be pleased to answer them for you. And I'd like you to remind you that the registrations for that day are required by the 9th of June.